They never handed you a list. There was no orientation session for this, no manual slipped under your door, no email thread explaining the terms. And yet, from the very first interaction, your Gen Z employee, your Gen Z child, your Gen Z partner has been watching whether you know the rules. Quietly measuring every conversation, every decision, every small unremarkable moment against a set of standards they have never once said out loud. And when you break one, they don't correct you, they don't argue, they don't send a formal complaint, they simply recalibrate, they pull back a degree, they stop sharing something they were going to share. They add one more data point to a private ledger you didn't know existed, a running total of whether this relationship, this job, this person is fundamentally safe or fundamentally not. This is not manipulation. It is not a power game. It is a generation that was burned so many times by institutions, authorities, and relationships that said the right words and did the wrong things, that they stopped announcing their expectations and started simply observing whether they were met. Here is what most people don't realize. By the time a Gen Z person tells you directly that something is wrong, the unspoken rules have already been broken so many times that the conversation is less a correction and more an exit interview. The silence that precedes it is the actual communication, and most people miss it entirely. These are the unspoken rules, the ones they expect you to know, the ones they will never tell you, and the ones that, when you finally understand them, will permanently change every relationship you have with this generation. Rule 1. Never perform authenticity. Either have it or don't. They will know within minutes. This is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is neuroscience. Mirror neurons, the neural cells responsible for reading social signals and mirroring the emotional states of others, are part of a system that evolved specifically to detect incongruence between what a person says and what their body, tone, and micro-expressions actually communicate. Research by Dr. Paul Ekman on micro-expression detection established that humans can read emotional dishonesty at a level far below conscious awareness. We don't decide to detect inauthenticity. We feel it before we can name it. Gen Z has spent their entire formative lives consuming thousands of hours of human faces on screens. Influencers performing relatability, brands performing values, politicians performing conviction. Their mirror neuron system has been trained on an unprecedented volume of authentic versus performed emotion. The calibration is extraordinary. When you walk into the room performing enthusiasm, you don't feel. Performing interest in their work you haven't actually engaged with. Performing a set of company values you privately find abstract, they feel it. Not as a thought, as a physical discomfort, a shift in the room. The rule is not be perfect, the rule is be real. Admit when you don't know something, say when a decision was hard, let a moment of genuine uncertainty show on your face. That is not weakness in their framework. That is the only currency of trust they actually accept. Rule 2. If you say it, do it. Every single time. The follow-through is everything. The small follow-through even more than the large one. You said you would send that feedback by Thursday. You said the door was always open. You said this company values its people. You said their contribution mattered. You said you would look into it. These are not throwaway sentences in their accounting system. They are entries in a ledger that tracks the distance between your words and your reality. Science has now confirmed through research in attachment theory and developmental psychology that the single most reliable predictor of secure attachment in any relationship, whether between a parent and child, a manager and employee, or an institution and its members, is behavioral consistency. Not grand gestures. Consistency. The brain builds a predictive model of every person it depends on. Every time your behavior matches your words, the model is confirmed and a small deposit of trust is made. Every time it doesn't, a withdrawal is made, and the withdrawal is always larger than the deposit. Generation Z grew up watching institutions make promises and break them at scale. The financial system, the climate, the social contract of work hard and you will be rewarded. Each of those broken promises trained their predictive model to weight inconsistency very heavily, to treat a gap between word and action not as a mistake, but as a revelation of character. The rule is not, be perfect. The rule is, only say what you will actually do, and then do it every time. Rule 3. Their time has the same value as yours. The meeting that could have been an email. The vague brief that sends them in the wrong direction for 2 days. The last-minute pivot that erases a week of work. The disorganized system that forces them to chase the same piece of information across 5 different platforms. You experience these things as operational friction. They experience them as a statement about how much their time, and therefore they themselves, are valued by this environment. Here is what most people don't realize. Gen Z is the first generation to have grown up with on-demand everything. Streaming replaced scheduling. Instant messaging replaced waiting. Information became available at the precise second it was needed. Their relationship with time is fundamentally different from the generations that grew up waiting. This does not mean they are impatient in the pejorative sense. It means their nervous system has a much lower tolerance for structural inefficiency because they have spent their entire lives inside systems that were built to eliminate it. When they encounter organizational waste, they don't read it as quote 0. They read it as quote 1. The rule is simple. Respect their time as a finite, irreplaceable resource. Run meetings that have a purpose and end when that purpose is met. Give briefs that contain the information needed to actually execute. Build systems that are clean enough that the work itself can be the focus. Do this and their engagement will follow. Fail to do it and you will watch their energy slowly redirect toward an environment that will. Rule 4. Silence is not agreement. Read it before it becomes a resignation. When they go quiet, something has happened. When the usually engaged voice in the room stops contributing, when the responses to your messages become shorter, when the energy in their presence shifts from forward-leaning to contained, a rule has been broken. And they are waiting, without telling you they are waiting, to see if you will notice. Clinical psychologists identify this behavioral pattern as the withdrawal response. It is a protective mechanism that activates when the perceived cost of direct communication, conflict, rejection, or dismissal outweighs the anticipated benefit of expressing the need. In a world where direct expression of dissatisfaction has been met consistently with phrases like, "You're too sensitive," or "Just be a team player," or "That's not how it works here," the nervous system learns to conserve, to watch, to wait. What their nervous system is saying during the silence is not, "I don't care anymore." It is saying, "I am not sure this is a safe enough space to tell you what I actually think. I am giving you one more window to demonstrate otherwise." Most managers and parents wait for the verbal complaint, the direct confrontation, the formal notification of dissatisfaction. They never come. What comes instead is a 2-week notice, or a door that quietly closes and stops opening again. The rule is, learn to read the silence as a language, and when you hear it, move toward it, not with interrogation, but with genuine curiosity and the willingness to hear something uncomfortable. Rule 5. Do not make them choose between mental health and your expectations. If the choice is ever presented, even implicitly, they will choose themselves. They have already decided this. It is not negotiable and it was never going to be. The question is only whether the environment they are in will make that choice necessary, or whether it will be wise enough to never require it. Here is what most people don't realize. This is not selfishness. It is survival mathematics that previous generations were not permitted to perform. The research is unambiguous. The American Institute of Stress has documented that chronic workplace pressure without adequate autonomy or recovery time produces measurable physiological deterioration, elevated cortisol, compromised immune function, reduced prefrontal cortex activity, and accelerated burnout progression. These are not feelings, they are biological events. Gen Z watched an entire generation of parents and mentors sacrifice their nervous systems for institutional loyalty and receive, at the end of it, restructured pensions, layoffs during financial crises, and chronic health conditions that arrived precisely at retirement. Their brain ran a cost-benefit analysis on that data set and arrived at a conclusion that is both rational and self-preserving. The institution will not protect me. I have to protect myself. The rule is not never ask anything of them. The rule is build an environment where protecting their mental health and doing excellent work are not mutually exclusive outcomes, where sustainable pace is a structural feature rather than a personal concession. That is the environment where they will give you everything they have. Rule 6. Credit is sacred. Protect it. Absolutely. If they built it, they need to be seen as the person who built it. Not in a performative way, not in a way that requires applause, but in a way that is accurate. When their work disappears into the collective, when their idea surfaces in the leadership presentation without a name attached to it, when __2__ consistently replaces any specific acknowledgement of who on the team did what, they notice. And the account empties faster than almost any other breach of the unspoken code. Neuroscience research on reward and recognition confirms that the brain's response to having effort acknowledged is not vanity. It is a core part of the motivation cycle. The dopaminergic system that drives future effort is directly linked to whether past effort was accurately seen and credited. Without that acknowledgement, the system receives a signal that effort and outcome are not reliably connected, and a brain that cannot connect effort to outcome will eventually stop generating effort. For Gen Z, this is amplified by a lifetime of watching credit consolidate upward in organizations, corporations, and institutions. The rule is, be precise about who did what, say the name, in the room, every time. Rule 7. Do not ask them to perform emotions. They do not have mandatory enthusiasm, forced positivity, the team-building exercise everyone is required to love, the culture of performing okayness, regardless of internal state. The expectation that they arrive, engage, and exit with a consistent display of workplace happiness that maps more closely to brand management than to human experience. Their nervous system identifies this as psychological dishonesty, and it responds to psychological dishonesty the same way it responds to every other form of inauthenticity, with a slow, quiet withdrawal of trust. Research in emotional labor theory, first articulated by sociologist Arlie Hochschild, established that chronic performance of emotions that do not match internal states produces a specific form of cognitive and emotional exhaustion. It depletes the same psychological resources needed for genuine creativity, engagement, and loyalty. It is not harmless. It is not just culture. It is a tax levied on the most intimate resource a person has, their authentic internal state. The rule is, create an environment where the range of genuine human emotion has enough room to exist without consequence. Where a quiet day is not a red flag. Where "I'm struggling with this" is a sentence that can be spoken without the room shifting uncomfortably. Where the standard is not performed positivity but honest presence. Nobody gave you these rules in writing. That was never going to happen. Because the deepest expectations people carry are the ones they have never had to articulate, the ones so fundamental to their sense of safety and dignity that having to explain them would itself feel like a violation. But now you have the list, and what you do with it in the very next conversation, the very next meeting, the very next ordinary moment with the Gen Z person in your life is entirely up to you. They are not asking for perfection. They never were. They are asking for the same thing